Greetings, we hope all is well. This is the Walking by Faith podcast hosted by Minister Larry Montgomery, Sr. and friends. Genesis 1:1, KJV, states, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God."
Fucking card.
And 2 Corinthians 5:7, KJV, states, "For we walk by faith, not by sight." While Romans 10:17, KJV, says, "So then faith cometh by hearing, and hearing by the word of God." Which brings us to Hosea 4:6, KJV, that states, "My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge." Welcome to another episode of the Walking by Faith podcast. I am your host, Minister Larry Montgomery, Sr. The sole purpose of this podcast is to present candid discussions about various words that are found in the Bible with an eye towards defining in the context of these troubled times, along with clarity, insight, commentary, and hopefully some revelation to interested listeners. This podcast is a presentation of the Montgomery Media Group.tv and can be found on most podcast platforms. Video presentations are available on YouTube, the African American Shopping Network channel. This show is sponsored by www.theauthor'scorner.online. Please like us and follow us on Facebook.
Yes, and we're here. Thank God. Yeah. Well, welcome to another episode of the Walking by Faith podcast. I'm your host, Elder Dr. Larry Montgomery Sr. This week, we're doing part 2 of the roles of a biblical husband. Last week, if you remember, we talked about husband as a leader, and we referred to 1 Corinthians 11:3. But I want you to know that the head of every man is Christ, the head of woman is man, and the head of Christ is God. The second in those roles would be a husband is a laborer, and that comes from Genesis 2:15. The Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to tend and keep it. Okay? So this week we're going to move forward and go over the next 3 roles of a husband. And remember, you personally may not think that this information is of value to you for whatever your circumstance may be. But remember, you do come across other people who have different situations than you, younger people who have different situations going on than you. And this might be a word that you could, share with them that could help them. And so as a husband, okay, I find myself learning every day, not only learning from things that I've already done and experienced, but learning about new things that I didn't know about when I was coming along. So let's get started here. Number 3 in the 5. A husband is loyal. Matthew 5:28. But I say to you that whoever looks at a woman to lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Now that one is a tough one, as a man, and that does happen probably on a regular, daily. Just because you thought about it doesn't mean you need to act on it. But the point is that if you don't think about it, you will never consider acting on it. And so that's a challenge that we as men need to be prepared to confront on a daily basis. The General Social Survey said that 20% of men in marriage cheat and that men are 54% more likely to cheat than women. So that leaves us with clearly 20% of men in marriage cheat. So that's 80% of us are doing a good job. And then 54%, 54% are more likely to cheat than women. Well, that says that there's 46% of women out there who will cheat. And not saying that cheating is going around, but let us not stick our nose in the air and talk about, well, you did and you are, and you're, because you have just as much opportunity and propensity to do it. With that said, I wish this general cultural statistic would only apply to men who are not Christians. Go figure. A lot of Christian men still carry generational curses of unfaithfulness from their ancestors, which needs to be broken in the name of Jesus Christ for them to be loyal. And this is one of those things that I'd have to say is prevalent within a lot of households. And we don't really understand how it continues to perpetuate itself, which is simple. I can only speak about my situation. When I came up back in the early 50s, the accusation on Friday night was, oh, you want to go out and, with your floozies or whatever. And yeah, my father would not, he would not say anything, but, I'm just going to go down to the bar and play some pool. That's all I'm going to do, hang out with my fellas. And so that was the first indication of cheating that I became familiar with. And so it seemed to have been a conversation that was on a regular basis every week. He's being accused of going out and cheating on Friday night because he had his paycheck. Lo and behold, as things happened to roll out, tell the truth, shame the devil, that shoe was on the other foot, and but that was Saturday night. And so back and forth with my parents, hearing this on a regular basis, at first you don't really understand, you don't know, okay, fine. But then as you get older, you start to understand what they were talking about. And lo and behold, as you grow up, as you become an adult, that stuff is still ringing around in the back of your head, and you're just as susceptible to it happening to you as it happened to them. So from one generation to the next generation, it was only conversation but a regular conversation, something that became familiar for the children to hear on a regular basis, or to even see an incident where there was let's just say a fight over cheating or the accusation, because it's one thing to accuse somebody of doing something, and another thing to catch them. Yeah, crickets. I know. So we need to be cognizant of that. What we say and what we do around our children, does come back at some point. And so that generational curse, we need to be cognizant of that. Now, let me move on. Keys to staying loyal. You have to stop allowing flirting to happen to you. Men can't walk in purity if they don't stop tolerating flirting from women the devil sent to assassinate their marriage. This is not in any way disrespectful to women because men are as guilty as women, where men are guilty most of the time is in tolerating flirtation at work, online, keeping dating profiles active, sliding into DMs, I guess that's direct messages, and texting people they have no business texting. The devil is out to destroy your marriage, and everything starts with flirtation. The grass is not greener on the other side. Dismiss the lie that the grass is greener on the other side. The grass is greener where you water it. That would be where you watered it. If you don't water your own marriage, you are responsible for why everything is dry and parched, not your spouse. We have to water our own marriage. And excuse me, and that's an interesting point, um, because it's easy to get up, and we're going to talk a little more about this, the marriage thing here. It's easy to come up with the fact, well, my wife, she doesn't do this, and she won't do that, and this and that there, and all kinds of, and I have needs and stuff. She got needs too. Maybe you should spend some time trying to identify her needs and addressing her needs with all that extra time you got on your hands because she's not addressing your needs. All right. See, we still, and I keep saying this over and over again. Why are you here? If it's all about you, this is going to be a miserable life because at the end, you're going to realize that, oh, gee, it wasn't all about me. It was about everybody else that I came in contact with, that the Lord placed in my path for me to minister to, or to me to be of help to, okay, to be a blessing to show them what God has, or tell them about what God has done for me. Because if it wasn't for me, if it wasn't for Him, who knows where we would be? Let me go on. You must understand the principle of 80-20. That's 80-20, 80-20. As perfect as your wife is, she can only meet 80% of your needs. That's if she's perfect. She can only meet 80% of your needs. The most perfect wife can only meet 80% of her husband's need. The remaining 20% is enough for the devil to use to torment and tempt you unless you submit it to God to transform you. What happens, especially when life gets busier and your children are growing up, is the devil will bring somebody into your life who will fill the 20% your wife is missing. He will paint this beautiful Hollywood fantasy that your life would be better if you leave the 80% you have with your wife for the 20% you want. Now, let me just finish this point. Men that fall for this deception should discover that no perfect woman would ever date a married man. You are destroying your own moral code and foundation. You can have a new marriage with the same spouse if you change your attitude and how they treat your spouse. This is why it is important to water the garden that you are in instead of fantasizing about somebody else's lawn. This particular society has encouraged certain thinking, is celebrated certain thinking, and it just continues to bombard men and women with it. Like this is, you keep hearing something, the same thing over and over again, and you may know that it's wrong, but you keep hearing it to the point of you start to think that it's right. You have a wife. She's your wife. She's submitted to you. She's willing. She's wanting you. And you think that this other woman has got more to offer than your wife. But she's only getting 20% of you because the other 80% is something that you really should be preserving for your wife because you know that is that's my constant, that's my rock, that's there. All right. I know this is going to be my 80%, but then this other 20%, oh yeah, you sit around at the bar, you sit around at the card table, you sit around the sports game, you at the gym or whatever, and you're talking with your friends and say, oh yeah, well, so and so was running around with so and so, and like, oh yeah, well, she's good. Wait a minute. What, what are we saying here? We're encouraging ourselves to continue to be disobedient to what God would have us to do. We're encouraging ourselves to be, unfaithful. And then when it comes back at us in one way or another, oh, wow, this is wrong. This ain't right. This is why they do this to me. Yeah, well, it's bad enough if you were not fornicating and then your mate was. So when you spin that around, you're out fornicating and your mate's not. But when they hear about it, when they find out about it, how do you think they feel? You think they feel any less hurt than you would feel if they had did it to you first? I mean, come on. Let's get real here. The other 20% that you're giving to this other woman, what makes you think that that's actually, because a lot of us, a lot of us say, oh, this grass is greener than the grass I have. So let me leave the grass that I have and move over here and get with the grass that's greener. And then when you get there, suddenly you find out that 80% of that lawn is weeds for one reason or another. People, they marry one person and then after a while, this isn't working out, and you want to divorce, and then next thing you know, you married, the woman that you were sleeping with before you divorced your wife. That's the one why you divorced your wife. And now you're starting to see the reality that she isn't all you thought she was. It's one thing to be sleeping with her for a couple hours at the motel. It's another thing to be sleeping with her 24/7. Whoa, she acts just like my old wife. Sometimes she don't want to be bothered, and she's flirting with other guys on it. All those excuses, all those reasons you had lined up for why this one, the one you had in the beginning, the one that God gave you, the one that was providing you with this so-called 80%. All those reasons why that didn't work, that wasn't going to work for you. Now you see them all in this whole new relationship. Let me go on. Don't hang out with the opposite sex alone. Nah. Even if you are in management, you can go over things with people in a public setting where other people are present. The moment you start to spend time alone with the opposite sex, as a married man or woman, you are stepping on dangerous territory. You it's a tough situation for men and women, and we have to understand our position. You know, And I'm going to go on because there's going to be another point here that's going to really make you think here. Avoid talking about your personal life with the opposite sex. Now, how many of you out there sit around and chat with your male friends or your female friends or whatever about your house? What's going on in your house? How many? I would say raise your hand, but I can't see you. Similarly, we must avoid this trap of the devil. The moment you open your personal life to a person of the opposite sex, you are inviting them to be intimate with you emotionally. It might start slowly, but this leads to other intimacies. This does not mean that we are constantly blocking out the opposite sex, but your personal life should not be exposed to someone you don't want to have a bond with. When you are struggling in your marriage, you don't want to make bonds with other people. What do you want to do? Well, you want to go to God because He put you there. And He'll fix whatever the problem is, however He sees fit. Somebody's, wow, why I got to stay with this woman? Why I got to stay with this man? Because, wait a minute. Why they got to stay with you? Look at it that way. You want to have a godly marriage, and you got to go to God. You want to have a good marriage, you got to go to God. All right? Because if you haven't been married before and it worked out the way it should have worked out, there was a flaw that you missed. Either was on your side of the bed or is in the other side of the bed. There's a flaw there. There's a problem. Now, how do you fix it? Well, first off, you got to figure out who was the problem. And then how were you involved in that, whether you perpetuated it or created it. Anyway, you ain't listening to me. I don't hear what I got to say here. This does not mean that we are constantly blocking out, and I think I said that already. When you're struggling in your marriage, okay, you don't want to make bonds with other people. Keep a fire in your fireplace. The best way to avoid emotional or physical intimacy with someone else is to keep the romance. Keep the fire in your own fireplace. Keep your marriage healthy. Number 4, a husband is a learner. And before I get there, I want to do this.
Why by crossing the bridge to fatherhood? Hosea 4:6 KJV tells us that my people perish for lack of knowledge. In today's culture, that statement seems to become truer by the day when it comes to black children. When we look at the impact of fatherlessness on the black family household over the last 30 years, we see the culmination of all of our culture's efforts to disparage black people through the breaking down of our most basic stronghold, our family unit. Today's culture has used and misused black men almost since the day we arrived in America. We have been abused, enslaved, blamed, and accused for everything from being lazy when they don't fairly employ us, to physically abusing us when we excelled, to enslaving us to do what they should have done for themselves and more. This American culture we live in has incarcerated us, experimented on us, and designed a separate definition to us. And as soon as we start complying with this designated new nature, they blame us for not succeeding and causing fear and distrust in the very same culture we find ourselves discouraged to be a part of. So what do we need to overcome this brainwashing, you ask? We need to return to our roots. We need to get back to being the kings and queens we once were. We need direction from God. The good news is that He has already given us the directions we need. The guide to crossing the bridge to fatherhood is just that. Here we review the directions the Bible holds for our return to greatness within our own homes and communities. Read Crossing the Bridge to Fatherhood by Elder Dr. Larry Montgomery, Sr. Available on Amazon and www.theauthor's corner. online in both ebook and paperback formats. Get your copy today and read it to your entire family.
Okay. Number 4. A husband is a learner. Learner. 1 Peter 3:7. Husbands, likewise, dwell with them with understanding, giving honor to the wife as to the weaker vessel, and as being heirs together of the grace of life, that your prayers may not be hindered. This verse is loaded with revelation for men. If we don't fulfill the petitions of our wives, it could hinder our prayers from being answered. The Bible says here that the wife is the weaker vessel, not the weak vessel. If it said the wife is the weak vessel, it means the man would be the strong vessel. This means that the man is weak, but the wife is weaker. Weaker in which regard? The word is not weaker in the sense of less than, but the work weaker there has to do with the way you handle highly valuable material. You don't treat fine china like paper plates because they break easier. The reason you handle fine china plates carefully is because of how much you value them. A husband should value his wife like fine china. And that's a quote from Dr. Tony Evans. Husbands, learn your wives. Dwell with understanding with your wife means you have to figure your wife out. In the simplest of terms, understanding your wife comes down to this. If you know what bothers her, don't do it. If you know what she likes, do it. Let me read that again. In the simplest of terms, understanding your wife comes down to this. If you know what bothers her, don't do it. If you know what she likes, do it. Many men struggle when it comes to understanding women. Their brains are wired differently. Men are more logical, women are more emotionally connected. Here are some differences. Women love processes. Men love goals. Women love romance. Men love sex. When processing things, women need sensitivity. Men want space. When stressed, women become overwhelmed and emotionally involved, while men become focused and withdrawn. Women feel better by talking about the problem. Men prefer solving it. Notice that the Bible doesn't instruct women to dwell with their husbands with understanding. It instructs husbands. This means we as husbands have a greater responsibility to understand our wives and meet them at the point of their needs. This is how to honor our wives. Now, the thing about that point is it requires men to do something that we're not comfortable doing. It requires men to stop and think about her. It's not about me, the man should think. It's about her. I said this earlier on in the conversation. Why are you here? To entertain yourself? To have all that you want and be you? Or to be of benefit, to be a blessing to somebody else? And that somebody else, number one on the list, would be your wife and your children. It's all about them, helping them, sacrificing for them so they'll have what you didn't have or more than what you had or however. It's not about you. Okay. Number 5, and we're coming to a close here. A husband is a lover. We all can buy into that one. Ephesians 5:25. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for it. 5 ways to make your wife feel loved. 1. Buy her flowers and gifts, or let her buy gifts herself. 2. Spend time with her. 3. Do house chores. 4. Physically touch her without initiating sex. That one's hard. Number 5, compliment her. Let me explain further. Any love that does not involve giving is not biblical. It doesn't have to always or only be flowers. It is the thought that counts. Often, a cash gift is the best option to avoid misunderstandings or disappointment when the gift you bought is inevitably in the wrong color or size. When I say spend time with your wife, I do not mean while both of you are watching a movie together. How a man feels he has spent time with his wife is through shared activity. The way wives feel connected to their husbands is not through doing a shared activity, but a wife needs uninterrupted quality time where her husband asks her the following questions. How was your day? If your wife says it was fine, delve deeper. Can you unpack that thought for me? How did that make you feel? Number 4, really? What did that make you feel like? Or why did that make you feel that way? Keep going like this in about 10 or 15 minutes. She will feel all the burdens of the day have lifted off, the stress is gone, and she will feel you have listened to her and understood her. Listened and understood. Actually, engage with her in conversation, not texting and scrolling while you talk to her. It is one of the hardest things for men to do, but it is one of the most powerful things a wife needs her husband to do. Do chores for your wife, even if her love language is not acts of service. Serve your spouse, even with simple things as a husband. It makes your wife feel more loved. Feeling loved versus being loved. Husbands have difficulty understanding the difference between feeling loved and being loved. We know in our hearts that we love our wives. If we didn't, we wouldn't be with them. We believe that the fact we are with them is a sign that we love them. When we got married, we told them we loved them. And if we had changed our minds, we would have notified them. The woman does not know she is loved unless she feels she is loved. And her feeling loved seems to fluctuate on a 24-hour basis. As the Bible says, new every morning is God's mercy. So remember, no, so remember, I think I wrote the wrong word here, has to be reminder. So your reminder, I'm sorry, has to be for your wife that you love her. This physical touch is a non-sexual public display of your love for your wife. It can be as simple as holding her hand or opening a door for her in public. Or if she's driving the car and you're in it and you have to stop for gas, you get out, pump the gas. In our culture today, this is no longer celebrated, but we want to raise godly men and godly gentlemen who will honor and love their wives publicly. This is important not only to build your marriage, but to build your children's view of how marriage should be and how they should show affection publicly to their spouses. Complimenting your wife. Every wife wants to feel beautiful and loves to look good, especially for her husband. The hard part for men is to give them compliments when they do. Complimenting your wife is not just about saying good. Love your wife by being generous with your vocabulary and complimenting her in a more detailed and expressive way. Remember, she needs to feel that she is loved. Jesus washes the church with the word, Ephesians 5:26. Do the same for your wife, and she will be nourished and nurtured. A wife will only bloom in the garden her husband waters for her. Raise your wife's value in your own eyes. Don't wait for her to change her appearance. Sow into your wife. Bless her, nourish her, and she will flourish and bloom in the garden of your marriage as your wife, a mother, and a daughter of God. The Bible tells husbands not to react to how their wife treats them, but to love them how Christ loves them. And so that would conclude our discussion this week on the 5 roles of biblical husbands. And so, like I said, this conversation wasn't merely designed for married couples or just men or just women. It was designed to help everyone get an understanding of what God would have the husband to do and to be like. So those who are going to become husbands in someday, that was some information to help them. For those who were looking for a husband, that was some information for them. Because look, sometimes just because a person has a degree or has a high-paying job or looks smart doesn't mean they are actually smart. And being smart does not mean that you know everything about everything. Being smart is understanding that there's a heck of a lot more out there for you to know that you don't know, that you should know, okay? And figuring out how to get what you need when you need it or before you need it, all right? So feel comfortable to share with your husband. Husbands, feel comfortable to share with your wives. These are the things that, God would have me to do. And, sometimes I forget or I may not necessarily understand. And feel free to help me to understand. Point it out, not beat me in the head, but point it out. And yeah, sometimes you forget 2 or 3 times before it starts to stick. So be patient. You want someone to be patient with you, and be patient with someone else. And so let me leave you with this last commercial until next week, when we'll talk about something else. I don't know what yet, but I'm sure God will give me a thought, and I'll do my best to bring it to you. Until then, thank God, thank you, and God bless.
East. Heavenly Invitation by Dr. Larry Montgomery, Sr. Are you going to heaven? Ever ask, how can I guarantee my eternal destination? Want to know what is the difference between Sheol, Hades, hell, the lake of fire? Ever wonder, did Jesus go to hell between his death and resurrection? Do you know where hell lies? Question, is Satan the master of hell? Want to know what is purgatory? Can you tell me what happens after death? Do you know the 9 facts about heaven? What are the 10 distinct differences between faith and unbelief? Read The Heavenly Invitation by Dr. Larry Montgomery, Sr. Available on Amazon and at theauthor'scorner.online. Order your copy today. Thanks, and God bless. Thanks be to God. You have been listening to another episode of the Walking by Faith podcast, hosted by Minister Larry Montgomery, Sr. and friends. Join us again next time as we continue to labor in this vineyard with an eye towards bringing the words of God to those who are interested. Remember, the sole purpose of this podcast is to present candid discussions about various words that are found in the Bible with an eye towards defining in the context of these troubled times, along with clarity, insight, commentary, and hopefully some revelation to interested listeners. This podcast is a presentation of the Montgomery Media Group.tv and can be found on most podcast platforms. Video presentations are available on YouTube, the African American Shopping Network channel. This show is sponsored by www. The Author's Corner. Online. Please like us and follow us on Facebook. May God continue to bless you and yours until next time. God bless.